Mountains bow down to the whisper of his name. Ocean still there, waves at the sound of his fame. Every knee will fall, every...
Behold, Tyre, your wealth will not save you. The time of your judgment is at hand.
Behold, I am against you, O Tyre. They will lay your stones and timbers in the water. You shall be built.
Jesus, brighter than the stars, shining through the ages. He deserves all the glory.
City of Babylon, heed my words. The old world burns so that the new may be born. Cross the waters and charge. Take Nineveh now. Push the engines forward. The storm is with us. Toast to Babylon, the eternal city. May the celebration last all night.
O king, you are this head of gold, but another kingdom shall rise after you. He speaks the truth. Astonishing.
His mercy here to stay.
By my decree, the house of the Lord in Jerusalem shall be rebuilt. Let the people go up and build it.
The dry bones live again. Rejoice! The nation is reborn!
Name and lineage. State your purpose here.
All travelers must register and pay the tax before entering the city.
Where is the baby boy who has been born king?
Scribes, look to the prophecies. Where is the Messiah to be born?
Shining through the ages, he deserves all the glory.
Fact or faith? You decide. Some say the Bible is just a book of spiritual inspiration. Others believe it holds the keys to the past, present, and future of humanity. But what happens when ancient prophecies written thousands of years ago come to life in the pages of world history? Let us pause for a second. If someone handed you a document from the 7th century BC, claiming to predict the fall of an empire that wouldn't collapse for another 200 years, would you call it a coincidence if it came true? Because that is exactly what we're about to uncover. The Bible contains over 2,500 prophetic statements, and scholars estimate that more than 2,000 of them have already been fulfilled, many with shocking precision. This isn't just about blind faith. We're diving into what can be verified. Prophecies backed by archaeological discoveries, ancient manuscripts, and secular historical records dot in this video. We're counting down the top 10 biblical prophecies that came true. And we're not just going to quote scripture. We're going to test each prophecy against real-world historical proof. Verified names, verified dates, verified places, and in some cases, startling precision that still leaves historians scratching their heads. But we're not here to preach. We're here to explore. Whether you're a believer looking for faith-affirming evidence or a skeptic curious about the Bible's historical claims, what you're about to see may shift your perspective forever. Here are a few questions to keep in mind as we begin. Can ancient writers really predict future empires, leaders, and geopolitical events? Are these prophecies genuine, or were they written after the events took place? And if they're real, what does that mean for us today? To answer those, we'll approach each prophecy like a mystery case, presenting the biblical claim, examining the historical timeline, and pointing to the evidence that confirms or challenges it. No fluff, just facts. Our standard is clear. Can the events be verified through credible, non-religious sources? And make no mistake, these are not vague predictions, like a great power will rise. These are detailed statements involving specific cities, kings by name, and time frames. So accurate they almost read like history written in reverse. These predictions span centuries, and yet their accuracy stands tall, even under scholarly scrutiny. You'll hear about the once mighty city of Tyre, reduced to ruins exactly as foretold. About the return of Israel as a nation, after disappearing for nearly 2,000 years. And how an obscure Hebrew prophet named Isaiah predicted the rise of a Persian king, by name, over a century before he was born. What is even more fascinating, many of these prophecies were preserved across multiple copies of ancient texts, verified through manuscript dating techniques like carbon-14 testing, linguistic consistency, and archaeological discoveries from the last 2 centuries that were never known to earlier generations. This video isn't just a countdown. It is a challenge to what we think we know about history and about the possible existence of a power beyond time. So whether you're watching this with a Bible in your hand or with a raised eyebrow, buckle up, because once we start, you'll realize this isn't just ancient mythology. This is history. Verified. Let us begin the countdown with prophecy number 10. The shocking fall of one of the most impenetrable cities in the ancient world, Tyre. Imagine a city so rich, so fortified, and so confident in its power that it thought no enemy could ever bring it down. That city was Tyre, the shining jewel of the Phoenician Empire, a commercial superpower, and one of the most impenetrable cities in the ancient world. But over 2,500 years ago, a prophet named Ezekiel stood in the land of Israel and made an audacious claim. In Ezekiel 26, he proclaimed that Tyre would be completely destroyed, its towers pulled down, its stones and timber thrown into the sea, and it would become a bare rock, a place for spreading nets. A bold prediction, especially considering powerful navy of Tyre and strategic island fortress. At the time of this prophecy, Tyre was thriving. It had massive walls, a strong military, and influence stretching from North Africa to Europe. So how could Ezekiel have predicted its downfall with such detailed precision? Let us break it down. Step 1 of the prophecy came to pass in 586 BC. Just after the fall of Jerusalem, the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar II laid siege to mainland Tyre for 13 years. Eventually, he broke through and conquered the city, but most of the wealth of Tyre and power had already moved offshore to an island half a mile from the coast. While the mainland was devastated, the island city survived and flourished. Prophecy failed, right? Not quite. Fast forward 250 years later to 332 BC. Enter Alexander the Great. In his conquest of the Persian Empire, Alexander demanded the surrender of Tyre. The island city refused. What Alexander did next is straight out of a movie. He ordered his men to dismantle the ruins of old Tyre, stone by stone, and throw the rubble into the sea, creating a causeway to reach the island. Using the very stones, timber, and debris of the destroyed mainland city, the forces of Alexander built a land bridge. After 7 months, his army breached the walls and destroyed island Tyre. In essence, the prophecy of Ezekiel came true in 2 stages. First, Nebuchadnezzar broke the mainland. Then, Alexander completed the job in a way that fulfilled the exact imagery Ezekiel used. They will throw your stones, timber, and rubble into the sea. Today, archaeologists confirm the remnants of ancient Tyre beneath that very causeway. Divers have found columns and ruins scattered along the sea floor, literally fulfilling the words, "You will be a place to spread nets upon." Incredibly, Tyre has never been fully rebuilt to its former glory. The modern city of Tyre is built on different foundations, and much of ancient Tyre remains underwater or buried under rubble. No powerful empire ever restored it. The prophecy stands. Some critics argue Ezekiel got lucky, or that the language was poetic, but the specificity, the multi-phase destruction, the use of rubble in the sea, the permanent fall, sets this apart from typical ancient predictions. Let us put it in perspective. A man in 1940 predicts that Berlin will fall to 2 different armies, that its ruins will be used to build a highway, and that it will never return to its past power. Then it happens exactly like that. Half a millennium later. Coincidence? Or something more? That is why the fall of Tyre ranks as number 10 on our list. A prophecy spoken in a desert, fulfilled across centuries by 2 world powers, with the evidence lying beneath the waves to this day. Next up, another vanished city, Nineveh. At its peak, Nineveh was the crown jewel of the Assyrian Empire, a city of unmatched grandeur, towering walls, sprawling palaces, and unimaginable wealth. It was so massive that the walls stretched nearly 8 miles, wide enough for 3 chariots to ride side by side. People thought it was untouchable, indestructible. But then came a chilling prophecy. Around 650 BC, the Hebrew prophet Nahum spoke against Nineveh. In the book that bears his name, just 3 short chapters, he boldly declared that Nineveh would be utterly destroyed. He said it would be laid waste, so completely that no one would even be able to locate its ruins. Let that sink in. Nahum 3-7 reads, "All who see you will flee from you and say, 'Nineveh is in ruins. Who will mourn for her?'" This was a daring statement. At the time, Nineveh was at the height of its power, the center of the most brutal and dominant military force of the world. The Assyrians crushed enemies without mercy, deported entire populations, and flaunted their terror tactics on stone reliefs that we still have today. So how does an empire like that vanish? According to historians, in 612 BC, a coalition of Babylonians, Medes and Scythians laid siege to Nineveh. The city, protected by walls and the Kosa River, seemed safe. But according to multiple ancient sources, a massive flood, possibly triggered by heavy rain or sabotage, washed away part of Nineveh's wall, allowing the attackers to breach the city. What followed was a massacre. The palaces were looted. The temples were burned. The elite were slaughtered, and the city was abandoned. The prophecy of Nahum, made decades earlier, played out in terrifying detail. Nahum 2-6 even says, "The river gates are opened, and the palace collapses." That's not just poetic, it is historical. The river quite literally opened the city to destruction. But perhaps the most astonishing part, for centuries after its destruction, Nineveh disappeared. Travelers in the Middle Ages passed over its ruins without even knowing they were there. It was as if the earth itself had swallowed the fulfillment of prophecy. It wasn't until the 1840s that British archaeologists, Austin Henry Layard and Hormuzd Ressam, began excavations in modern-day Iraq. They uncovered palace walls, tablets, statues, and carvings, confirming that the site near Mosul was, in fact, ancient Nineveh. Nahum had predicted the complete erasure of the city from memory, and history obliged for over 2,000 years. Today, we have evidence of its grandeur and its fall, but the prophecies claim that it would vanish from the consciousness of the world held true for millennia. And here's what makes it even more chilling. No one rebuilt Nineveh. No nation came back to restore it. No modern city was founded atop it, just barren mounds, covered in dust and legend. Critics might say the fall of empires is predictable, but predicting the sudden fall of the most powerful city on earth followed by its disappearance for 2 millennia and the role of a flooded river in its downfall. That's something else. So, was Nahum just lucky? Or was he speaking with insight beyond human capability? The fall of Nineveh checks every box. Detailed prophecy, unexpected method of destruction, confirmed archaeological evidence, and a timeline that defies coincidence. That is why the obliteration of Nineveh lands at number 9 on our list. A warning written in ancient ink, fulfilled in blood, water, and dust. What if I told you that a nation could vanish off the map for nearly 2,000 years and then reappear in the exact same location, with the same name, the same language, and the same religion? That is not fiction. That is the modern state of Israel. And the Bible predicted it long before it happened. Let us rewind to the 6th century BC, when the Jewish people were taken into exile in Babylon. Even as they wept by the rivers of Babylon, the prophets were speaking of something incredible. Not only would Israel be scattered across the world, but one day they would be brought back, reborn as a nation. In Isaiah 66-8, written over 2,500 years ago, we find this jaw-dropping line. Who has ever heard of such things? Can a country be born in a day, or a nation be brought forth in a moment? That verse became a reality on May 14, 1948, when Israel was reborn in a single day by a vote of the United Nations. After nearly 2 millennia of dispersion, war, and persecution, the Jewish people once again had a homeland. It is hard to overstate how impossible this seemed before it happened. From the Roman destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD to the Holocaust, the Jewish people had endured centuries of displacement. They had no government, no army, no homeland. Empires rose and fell, but Israel remained in exile. And yet the Bible kept, declaring that this would not be permanent. In Ezekiel 37, the prophet sees a valley of dry bones, a symbolic vision of the complete lifelessness of Israel. But then, in a miracle, the bones are reassembled, given flesh, and brought back to life. God tells Ezekiel, "These bones are the whole house of Israel. I will bring you back to the land of Israel." At the time, that sounded like poetic comfort, but today, it reads like a script. Here's what makes it undeniable. Not only was Israel reborn as a nation, but its people returned from all corners of the globe. Russia, Ethiopia, Europe. The Middle East Jews returned in waves, speaking Hebrew, which had not been a living spoken language for over 1,700 years. Yet it was revived. And this didn't happen in ancient history. It happened on camera. You can watch footage of David Ben-Gurion declaring the independence of Israel, while Jews wept in the streets of Tel Aviv. A biblical promise unfolding live on the world stage. Let us also look at the impossible odds. Israel was immediately attacked by surrounding nations. It had no real military, and yet it survived. Not once, but repeatedly. In 1948, 1967, and 1973. And with each war, it gained more territory and deeper resolve. Now, critics argue that the rebirth of Israel was political, not prophetic. But if that is the case, how do you explain the millennia? Old predictions that this exact event would occur? And more importantly, how do you explain that it happened in one day, just as Isaiah wrote? Today, Israel is not only a thriving nation, but one of the most advanced economies and militaries in the world. The ancient prophecies didn't just come true, they came true in every detail. Scattered, preserved, reborn, against every historical precedent. That is why the rebirth of Israel ranks at number 8 on our list. A nation resurrected from the dust of exile by a prophecy written before the exile ever began. Next up, the fall of another empire, Babylon, and a prophecy tied to a king who never even read the scroll that predicted his arrival.
Chains are breaking loose, darkness turns to day.
At one point in history, Babylon was the most powerful city on earth. Towering walls, golden temples, and the infamous Hanging Gardens, it was the jewel of Mesopotamia. A city of wealth, art, science, and pride. But while Babylon flourished, on the surface, the Hebrew prophets were already writing its obituary. In Isaiah 13, written over 150 years before the fall of Babylon, the prophet declares that Babylon will be overthrown like Sodom and Gomorrah, never to be inhabited. Again, Jeremiah 50 and 51 echo the same doom. The city would fall suddenly, be captured by a northern enemy, and become a desolate ruin. At the time of these prophecies, Babylon wasn't even the main superpower. It wouldn't reach its full glory until Nebuchadnezzar II reigned, over a century later. Yet the prophets spoke of its destruction as inevitable. Fast forward to 539 BC. The mighty city of Babylon stood behind walls so thick that 2 chariots could race side by side on top of them. The Euphrates River ran through the city, providing endless water and a natural defense. It was believed to be impenetrable. But outside the walls waited the Medo-Persian army, led by Cyrus the Great. According to both biblical texts and historian Herodotus, the Persians came up with a brilliant plan. They diverted the Euphrates River, lowering the water level enough for their soldiers to march under the walls. Through the riverbed, the gates of Babylon were left unlocked, possibly during a festival, and the city was taken without a battle. Just as Isaiah predicted, the gates will not be shut. Babylon, the jewel of kingdoms, will be overthrown. Even more shocking, the prophet Isaiah actually named Cyrus, by name, as the one who would conquer Babylon. In Isaiah 45:1, written nearly 2 centuries earlier, it says, "This is what the Lord says to his anointed, to Cyrus, whose right hand I take hold of, to subdue nations before him." Cyrus wasn't born until over 100 years after Isaiah wrote that. Yet he fulfilled the prophecy to the letter. How do we know this isn't just a biblical invention? Enter the Cyrus cylinder, a clay artifact discovered in the ruins of Babylon and now housed in the British Museum. It records Cyrus's conquest of the city and his decree allowing exiled peoples, including the Jews, to return to their homelands, exactly as described in the book of Ezra. So what happened to Babylon after that? Although it remained occupied for a while, its decline was rapid. By the time of Alexander the Great, it was already in ruins. Over time, it became uninhabited, buried beneath layers of sand and obscurity, just as prophesied. Even today, modern attempts to rebuild the area, including Saddam Hussein's effort in the 1980s, have failed to bring it back to life. Jeremiah wrote, "Babylon shall become a heap of ruins, a haunt of jackals, a horror and a hissing without inhabitant." And that is exactly what it became. A ghost city, echoing with forgotten glory. This wasn't a vague prediction about a great kingdom falling. It was a named city, a named conqueror, and a specific method of invasion, all foretold before the events happened. Could someone really guess all that? Or was it something more? That is why the fall of Babylon ranks at number 7 on our list. A superpower undone by prophecy, its conqueror named in advance. Its fate sealed in scrolls long before the soldiers ever crossed the river. Next up, the man who fulfilled that prophecy, Cyrus the Great, and the stunning moment he entered the story of the Bible centuries before he was even born. What if your name appeared in a book written 150 years before you were born, describing not only your rise to power, but the exact mission you'd fulfill? That is exactly what happened with Cyrus the Great, the founder of the Persian Empire. And his story is one of the most mind-blowing examples of specific, verifiable prophecy. Let us go back to the 8th century BC. The prophet Isaiah writes these words in Isaiah 44 minutes and 28 seconds to 45:1. This is what the Lord says, who says of Cyrus, "He is my shepherd and will accomplish all that I please." He will say of Jerusalem, "Let it be rebuilt," and of the temple, "Let its foundations be laid." Did you catch that? Isaiah names Cyrus by name 150 years before he was born. At the time, Jerusalem hadn't even been destroyed yet, and the temple was still standing. Yet, Isaiah predicts not only the destruction, but the rebuilding, and says that a king named Cyrus would be the one to make it happen. And what makes this prophecy even more compelling is that it is not vague. It doesn't say a leader or a ruler from the east. It says Cyrus. It says he will rebuild Jerusalem. And it says he will do it by freeing the Jewish captives. Fast forward to the 6th century BC. Cyrus the Great conquers Babylon in 539 BC, just as we saw in the last section. He then issues a decree recorded in both the Cyrus Cylinder and the book of Ezra. In Ezra 1-2-3, Cyrus proclaims, "The Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth, and he has appointed me to build a temple for him at Jerusalem in Judah." Boom. Direct fulfillment. Now, let us be clear. This wasn't a Jewish writer inserting wishful thinking. The Cyrus Cylinder, an artifact written from a Persian perspective and found in Babylon, confirms the policy of returning exiled peoples to their homelands, including the Jews. So we have 3 points of independent evidence: a prophecy naming Cyrus over a century in advance, a secular artifact confirming his decree, a biblical account that matches both. That is not speculation, that is synchronization. But it goes even deeper. In Isaiah 45:1, God calls Cyrus his anointed, a title normally reserved for Jewish kings. Cyrus was a Persian, a pagan, someone who didn't even follow the God of Israel. Yet Isaiah describes him as being chosen by God to accomplish a divine mission. Cyrus didn't just defeat enemies. He changed the geopolitical landscape. He allowed the Jewish people to return to their land, rebuild their temple, and restart their national identity. Without Cyrus, there is no Ezra, no Nehemiah, and possibly no Second Temple. Now, skeptics have tried to argue that the prophecy of Isaiah must have been written after Cyrus came to power. But the style, vocabulary, and scroll integrity show no signs of being a later addition. The Dead Sea Scrolls contain the same passages, dated to before the time of Christ. So either Isaiah made the most accurate geopolitical guess in ancient history, or something divine was at work. The rise of Cyrus the Great shows that biblical prophecy isn't just symbolic. It can be literal, detailed, and world-changing. That is why his appearance ranks at number 6 on our list. A foreign king named in advance, used by God to free a people, fulfill a promise, and shape the course of history without even knowing it. Coming up next, a chilling prediction made by Jesus himself, one that came true in blood and fire. The destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. It was a warm afternoon in Jerusalem, around 30 AD, when Jesus and his disciples stood outside the Second Temple, a marvel of ancient architecture. The disciples were admiring its beauty, its massive stones, its golden brilliance. But then, Jesus turned to them and said something chilling. "Do you see all these things? Truly I tell you, not one stone here will be left on another. Every one will be thrown down." Matthew 24:2, a prophecy made in public, in plain language, by Jesus himself. At the time, it sounded absurd. The Second Temple, built by Herod the Great, was the pride of Jewish identity. It stood tall over Jerusalem, fortified and protected by Roman authority. It was unthinkable that it could be destroyed, let alone completely dismantled, stone by stone. But within 40 years, Jesus' prediction came true, with horrifying precision. Let us fast forward to 66 AD. Tensions between Jews and Romans boiled over into full-scale rebellion. The Roman Empire responded with overwhelming force. By 70 AD, the Roman general Titus, son of Emperor Vespasian, laid siege to Jerusalem. What followed was one of the most brutal events in ancient history. According to historian Flavius Josephus, over 1.1 million people died, most of them Jews. The city was starved. People resorted to eating leather, weeds, and even more horrifying things. Bodies piled in the streets. The once bustling temple became a battlefield. When the Romans finally broke through the walls, they set the temple on fire. Flames engulfed the structure, melting the gold that had adorned the ceilings and walls. According to Josephus Roman, soldiers pried apart the stones to retrieve the gold that had run between the cracks. Fulfilling Jesus' words exactly, not one stone here will be left on another. Today, if you visit Jerusalem, you'll see the Western Wall, not a part of the temple itself, but part of the retaining wall that surrounded the Temple Mount. The temple itself, gone, completely dismantled. But Jesus' prophecy didn't stop at the temple. He also said in Luke 21:24, Jerusalem will be trampled by the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. And that is exactly what happened. For nearly 2,000 years, Jerusalem remained under foreign rule. From the Romans to Byzantines, to Muslims, Crusaders, Ottomans, and British. It wasn't until 1967, during the Six-Day War, that the city came under full Jewish control again. Even that part of the prophecy waited to be fulfilled. But here is what makes this prophecy so haunting. Jesus wasn't speaking in riddles. He was specific, public, and timed. He said it would happen within that generation. And it did, just 40 years later. Some critics argue that the Gospels were written after 70 AD, and that the prophecy was added in hindsight. But historical analysis shows that multiple New Testament books, especially the letters of Paul, make no mention of the destruction of the temple, which they certainly would have, had it already occurred. And Josephus, a non-Christian source, records the events in painful detail, verifying the siege, the fire, the dismantling, and the unimaginable death toll. This wasn't symbolic. This was a fulfilled prophecy etched in blood, fire, and stone. That is why the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD ranks at number 5 on our list. A moment where Jesus didn't just speak truth. He spoke history before it happened. Next up, a global prophecy that is still unfolding. The spread of Christianity to the ends of the earth. How does a message from an obscure preacher in a conquered Roman province become the most widespread faith in human history? In Matthew 24:14, Jesus made a bold prediction to his disciples. This gospel of the kingdom will be preached in the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. At the time he said this, Christianity didn't exist yet. There were no churches, no global reach, just a handful of followers, most of them fishermen, tax collectors, and commoners. They had no influence, no army, no money, and their leader had just been crucified. By every historical standard, Jesus' movement should have died on impact. And yet, here we are, 2,000 years later, and Christianity is the largest religion in the world with over 2.3 billion followers, spanning every continent, language, and culture. That is more than 1 in 4 people on the planet. How did this happen? And did Jesus actually foretell it? Let us take a closer look. After Jesus' resurrection, he gave what is known as the Great Commission. Go and make disciples of all nations. Matthew 28:19. His followers obeyed, reluctantly at first. But soon, the message began to spread, from Jerusalem to Judea, to Samaria, and then to the ends of the earth, just as Acts 1-8 outlined. Within decades, missionaries like Paul and Thomas had taken the gospel to Asia Minor, Greece, Rome, and even as far as India. Despite persecution, imprisonment, and execution, the early church didn't shrink. It exploded. By the 4th century, Christianity had become the official religion of the Roman Empire. But the prophecy didn't stop there. It wasn't just about reaching Rome. It was about the entire world. During the Middle Ages, missionaries crossed into Africa, China, and the tribal nations of Europe. During the Age of Exploration, the gospel reached North and South America, the Pacific Islands, and Australia. Today, the Bible is the most translated book in human history, available in over 3,500 languages. Christian churches can be found in nearly every country on earth, from underground house churches in China, to mega churches in South Korea, to village chapels in remote African plains. What makes this prophecy extraordinary is that Jesus said it at a time when it seemed completely unrealistic. Judaism didn't spread by conversion. Most people believed religion was tied to ethnicity and geography. But Jesus said his message would transcend those barriers. And it has. Even more remarkable, it hasn't stopped. In fact, Christianity is growing fastest in places where it was once illegal or unknown, like Iran, Nepal, and parts of sub-Saharan Africa. In many places, faith spreads not through conquest, but through quiet, resilient believers who share it one life at a time. This isn't just impressive, it is historical proof that a prophecy made by a man with no army and no empire came true, and is still coming true, centuries later. Critics say global religion is inevitable, that Jesus didn't just predict a religion. He predicted his own message would be preached to all nations, and specifically called it the gospel of the kingdom. That is why the global spread of Christianity ranks at number 4 on our list. A prophecy still unfolding in real time, spoken by a man from Nazareth, fulfilled in every nation on earth. Next up, a vision that outlines 4 empires before they ever came to power. The vision of Daniel of the 4 kingdoms. Imagine seeing the rise and fall of empires centuries before they existed. That is what the prophet Daniel claimed in a vision that still stuns historians and theologians. Today, the prophecy is found in Daniel chapter 2, and again in Daniel chapter 7. In chapter 2, the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar has a dream of a giant statue made of different metals. No one can interpret it, except Daniel, who not only explains the dream, but tells the king exactly what he dreamed. Without having heard it first, Daniel says the statue represents 4 great kingdoms that will rise and fall, each one different from the last, ending with a final kingdom established by God that will never be destroyed. Let us break it down. The head of gold represents Babylon, the empire Daniel lived in. He tells Nebuchadnezzar, "You are that head of gold." Babylon ruled from 605 to 539 BC. The chest and arms of silver represent Medo-Persia, which conquered Babylon under Cyrus the Great. As we've already covered, Medo-Persia ruled from 539 to 331 BC. Next comes the belly and thighs of bronze, symbolizing Greece, led by Alexander the Great, who conquered the known world faster than any general in history. Greece ruled from 331 to 146 BC. Finally, the legs of iron represent Rome, a brutal, militarized empire that crushed all opposition. Rome ruled from 146 BC and continued for centuries, both politically and culturally. And here is where it gets even more fascinating. The feet of the statue are made of iron and clay, a divided, unstable mix. Many scholars interpret this as the fragmented kingdoms that emerged after Rome, modern Europe, a mix of strong and weak nations that never fully unified. In Daniel 7, the same timeline is repeated, but with beasts instead of metals. A lion with wings, Babylon. A bear raised on one side, Medo-Persia. A leopard with 4 wings, Greece, split after Alexander's death. A terrifying beast with iron teeth, Rome. The imagery is different, but the sequence is the same. Daniel foresaw 4 major empires, each unique, each dominant, and each eventually brought low. But here is what makes this prophecy stand out. Daniel wrote this during the Babylonian Empire, before Persia, Greece, or Rome even existed as global superpowers. He didn't just predict that empires would rise. He described their character, their succession, and even the division of one of them, Greece, after its peak. Historians acknowledge the sequence of empires is accurate. What they debate is when Daniel was written. Some claim it must have been written after the events occurred. But ancient manuscripts like the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Septuagint include Daniel's writings long before Rome reached its peak. So was Daniel a historian pretending to be a prophet? Or a prophet with a vision of the world before it happened? That is why Daniel's vision of the 4 kingdoms lands at number 3 on our list. A blueprint of world empires, written in exile, and fulfilled with eerie accuracy over the next 600 years. Next, up. A prophecy that cuts even deeper. The rejection of the Messiah, predicted long before the cross ever stood on a hill, long before Jesus of Nazareth ever walked the earth. A prophecy was written that read more like a biography than poetry. It didn't just predict a coming savior, it detailed how he would be rejected, suffer and die, and that his own people would turn away from him. That prophecy is found in Isaiah 53, written more than 700 years before the birth of Jesus. Let us read it. He was despised and rejected by mankind, a man of suffering and familiar with pain. He was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. By his wounds we are healed. Isaiah 53 3-5. Now pause. This text was written centuries before crucifixion was even invented by the Persians and perfected by the Romans. Yet Isaiah describes someone being pierced, punished, and led like a lamb to the slaughter, who says nothing in his own defense. He was oppressed and afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth, like a lamb led to the slaughter. Isaiah 53-7, and it doesn't stop there. Verse 9 says he would be assigned a grave with the wicked, yet buried with the rich, fulfilled when Jesus was crucified between two criminals, but buried in the tomb of a wealthy man named Joseph of Arimathea. The prophecy even hints at resurrection. After he has suffered, he will see the light of life and be satisfied. Isaiah 53-11. This is not generic language. It is not vague. It is shockingly specific. Critics have argued that Isaiah 53 was written after Jesus lived. But that theory doesn't hold. Why? Because we have copies of the Isaiah scroll from the Dead Sea Scrolls dated to at least 150 years before Jesus was born. That means this prophecy was already part of Jewish scripture long before Jesus of Nazareth existed. And here is what is even more fascinating. Isaiah 53 isn't read in most modern Jewish synagogues today. It is skipped in the regular reading cycle. Why? Because it is simply too difficult to explain. It reads too much like Jesus. Now, let us go to the New Testament. In John 1:11 it says, "He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him." The rejection Jesus faced was not an accident. It was foretold. He predicted it himself multiple times. In Luke 17:25, he said, "But first he must suffer many things and be rejected by this generation." Even his betrayal by a friend for 30 pieces of silver was prophesied. In Zechariah 11:12-13, centuries before it happened. Jesus didn't just fulfill general messianic expectations. He fulfilled the painful parts, the undesirable parts, the ones that no one would ever want to apply to their hero. He wasn't embraced by the establishment. He was mocked, tortured, and executed. His own people cried, "Crucify him." And yet, Isaiah also said that through this suffering he would justify many. That is exactly what Christians believe, that through his death, millions would find forgiveness and life. What are the odds that one man, centuries later, could fulfill so many specific details written hundreds of years earlier? Details about how he'd live, how he'd die, how he'd be rejected, and how he'd be buried. That is why the rejection of the Messiah ranks at number 2 on our list. A prophecy not about kings or kingdoms, but about a man of sorrows, who was known before he was known, and whose story was told before it ever began. Coming up next, one final prophecy fulfilled in the quiet hills of Bethlehem. The moment history changed forever, the birthplace of the Messiah. We end our countdown with a prophecy so specific, so simple, and so unlikely that it could easily be dismissed if it hadn't come true so perfectly. Over 700 years before Jesus was born, the prophet Micah wrote these words, "But you, Bethlehem, Ephratah, though you are small among the clans of Judah, out of you will come for me one who will be ruler over Israel, whose origins are from of old, from ancient times." Micah 5-2. Let us break that down. Micah not only names the exact town, Bethlehem, but even which Bethlehem, distinguishing it from other towns with the same name. He calls it Bethlehem Ephratah, a tiny overlooked village in the region of Judah. Not Jerusalem, not Hebron, not Rome, a dusty, forgotten town. Yet from there, Micah says, a ruler will come. Not just any ruler, but one whose origins are from of old. A poetic phrase many scholars interpret as eternal or divine. Now here is the twist. Joseph and Mary didn't live in Bethlehem. They lived in Nazareth, nearly 70 miles away. A grueling journey on foot or donkey. Mary was heavily pregnant. There was no reason they would ever make that trip. unless something forced them to. Enter Caesar Augustus, who ordered a census requiring everyone to return to their ancestral hometowns. Joseph, being from the line of David, had to travel to Bethlehem. And that is where Mary gave birth to Jesus. Do you see it? Micah predicted the where. A Roman emperor, unknowingly, arranged the how. Jesus was born in the exact town Micah predicted, during a time when travel was rare and people didn't just move for convenience. The odds of fulfilling this prophecy accidentally are incredibly low. And it doesn't stop there. Micah said this ruler would shepherd the people of God. In John 10:11, Jesus says, "I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep." He also said the greatness of this ruler would reach to the ends of the earth. Today, the message of Jesus has spread to every continent, every nation, and billions of lives. And it all began in a manger, in a small town no one thought mattered. Even the Jewish religious leaders of Jesus' time understood this prophecy pointed to the Messiah. In Matthew 2, when the Magi arrive in Jerusalem looking for the newborn king, King Herod consults the chief priests and scribes. They immediately quote Micah 5:2 and say, "He will be born in Bethlehem." In other words, it was common knowledge among scholars that the Messiah would be born there. But no one expected the how a poor couple from Nazareth, a crowded inn, and a stable. So many prophecies could be explained away as metaphor or coincidence. But a named town, centuries in advance, fulfilled by a government order from an emperor, who had never even heard of Jesus. That is not just compelling. That is miraculous. It is why the birthplace of the Messiah takes the #1 spot on our list. A small village chosen by divine plan, a census moved by imperial power, and a child born in the most humble place, fulfilling a promise spoken centuries before. And that is the beauty of prophecy. Sometimes it doesn't come in fire or thunder, but in a quiet moment in a manger when no one is looking. So now, after all of that, 10 prophecies, centuries apart, spoken by different people in different places, the question remains, were these just lucky guesses? Coincidences? Or something more? Let us recap what we've seen. A king named Cyrus, written 150 years before he was born, and confirmed by archaeology. The exact timeline of the rebirth of Israel predicted by Ezekiel, down to the year. The destruction of Jerusalem, detailed by Jesus himself, fulfilled within a single generation, with historical proof from non-Christian sources. Global movement started by the son of a carpenter, predicted to reach all nations, now the largest faith of the world. A vision of 4 empires, from Babylon to Rome, mapped out in detail before 3 of them existed. A prophecy of a man who would be rejected, pierced, buried with the rich, and rise again, all written 700 years before Jesus. And the name of a tiny town, Bethlehem, picked out of obscurity, where a baby would be born and history would never be the same. None of these events were vague. None were written after the fact. And in many cases, the historical evidence exists outside the Bible, from ancient inscriptions to Roman records to eyewitness accounts. Skeptics will say, people made the prophecies fit the story. But if that's true, how do you orchestrate global empires, foreign kings, and national rebirth? How do you manipulate where you're born or who buries you? Or how an emperor decides to issue a census? You can fake a lot of things, but you can't fake time. You can't fake history. You can't fake prophecy that has been sitting in scrolls for centuries, verified by archaeology, manuscripts, and hostile witnesses alike. So what is the takeaway? These aren't just ancient predictions. These are breadcrumbs through history. Signs, signals, evidence, not only of what happened, but of who was behind it all. The Bible wasn't trying to impress anyone with fortune-telling. These prophecies were invitations, messages from God to say, I see the end from the beginning. I have a plan. I have a purpose. And I'm not done yet. Because the truth is, not all of the prophecies of the Bible have come true yet. Many are still unfolding right now. And if the ones we've covered have proven so precise, so detailed, and so accurate, maybe we should pay attention to the rest. Maybe these aren't just stories. Maybe they're warnings or promises, or both. And maybe, just maybe, this means that history isn't random, that there really is a design behind the chaos, and that the story of the world and your story isn't over yet. So what do you believe? Are these just myths? A series of impressive coincidences? Or is prophecy real? We've shown you the facts, the texts, the history. Now, it is your turn to decide. If you found this video eye-opening, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to see it. We've got more deep dives into biblical mysteries, ancient evidence, and powerful truths coming soon. Until next time, stay curious, stay bold, and keep asking the big questions.